The dust is yet to settle over the crude crisis rocking the Dangote oil refinery and the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NUPRC. The NUPRC says it has facilitated the domestic supply of over 29 million barrels of crude oil to Dangote Refinery from January to June 2024 and other refineries using the monthly production curtailment platform. But the Dangote Group last week insisted that the NUPRC failed to enforce the domestic crude supply obligations effectively, saying it is yet to get enough crude locally. However, Nigerians are jolted by a confession by David Hundeyin, a Nigerian investigative journalist who claimed to have been contacted to blackmail Dangote Refinery. Hundeyin disclosed how an international non-governmental organization offered him 800,000 naira to blackmail the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote Refinery. The journalist, in a series of tweets on Saturday, explained that his decision to make it public was to send a message to the external interest working on the same path as those within the country who are determined to counteract the interests of 500 million West Africans. Joining us now as we take a look at the current face-off between Dangote Refinery and NNPC alongside Hundeyin's allegation and how to resolve the crisis is Dumebi Kachikwu, former presidential candidate of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, in the 2023 elections in Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. Kachikwu, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right. So straight to it, I'm just giving an elaborate introduction into the situation on ground. I'm sure you've followed what's going on back and forth. But I'd like you, first of all, to start with this conversation around the domestic crude supply obligation and NUPRC saying they facilitated to Dangote Refinery. However, Dangote has said that they've only received 60% of what ought to be their allocation. What's your take on this? How do we resolve this matter? Because the action is hampering production capacity of Dangote Refinery, and so timelines aren't being met. It's hampering the business, billion-dollar investments. What's your take on this?
Well, I think that Nigerians need to be better informed and have a better understanding of the whole situation. When you speak about the PIA and that local refineries must have access to Nigeria's portion of the crude oil, the PIA was not detailed or specific as to say this is the quantum of crude oil that must be allocated to any one refiner, or did not say that any local refiner must have all the crude oil they require from the Nigerians' portion of the crude oil. So it was silent on that. And if you understand how the oil business works and refining, you know that there's no refinery in the world that depends solely on crude oil or domestically produced crude oil. You will also be surprised to know that all over the world, there are nations that don't have oil, but have refineries. I'll tell you this. Out of the top 7 refineries in the world, 2 of the biggest refineries in the world are in South Korea. South Korea has no proven reserves of oil. Singapore exports petroleum products. They have no proven reserves. So the refinery business is such that people get their crude oil from any part of the world where they have good contracts. America from 2018 to 2022 was the largest oil producer in the world, but America buys crude oil from all over the world. So I don't think we are on the right path when we make this whole issue about government, NUPRC, NNPC not giving Dangote enough crude oil. I believe that because this matter got into the public space, sentiments entered this matter and it's been blown out of proportion. When you have a refinery as large as Dangote's refinery, because when it's fully on stream, that's going to be the 7th largest refinery in the world, you ought to have planned or forecasted properly. You ought to have 4 years before have your contracts in place. I will tell you this, the Kaduna refinery, before they started that refinery, the Nigerian government entered into contracts with Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. They were buying crude oil from those countries. So there are a lot of issues around this. And I think since it got into the public space, a lot of emotions have gotten into it, and we are not separating facts from emotions anymore in this matter.
Okay, well, just to stay on the lane of facts, the facts are that Dangote was promised 29 million barrels of oil, and NUPRC has confirmed that the allocation was given, and Dangote Refinery is saying that they are yet to receive it. So that's where we are with that. However, beyond that, the conversation now, Aliko Dangote has been extremely vocal about the challenges that he has faced and what he feels is pushback that he's experienced. Now, my question to you, and as well with this conversation spilling into the public forum, do you think that there is a conspiracy against the Dangote Refinery and its success? Or do you think what we're witnessing is as a result of an institutional failure, a systemic failure that is making it difficult for this refinery to come online? What is the real challenge?
That's a brilliant question. I'll say this quickly. First of all, we hear that something was promised Dangote. In the oil and gas sector, we don't work on promises. You work with contracts. Does Dangote have any contract with anybody for that product? If he does have a contract, and if they failed to meet their contractual obligations, Dangote can head to court. I suspect that there might not be any contract. Number two, we have several refineries in Nigeria. Dangote's refinery happens to now be the largest, but outside of Dangote Refinery, you have the government-owned refineries, and you have smaller refineries like Walter Smith and Waterview. What NUPRC has said is that they've given several allocations to these people. But we forget one thing. The last administration entered into a lot of loan agreements. And entering those loan agreements, they forward sold our oil, or they used our oil that we are producing right now as a guarantee. What this essentially means is that the quantum of oil most people expect that Nigeria has to meet her domestic requirements for our domestic refineries is not as should be. So we don't want to speak to that. We don't want to understand that we're actually in a mess where that is concerned. And we want to speak to issues that, as far as I'm concerned, are really non-issues. Dangote's refinery, Dangote can get oil from any part of the world as long as he has money to pay for the oil. The same as Walter Smith, the same as any other refinery in Nigeria. And again, we know you guys report this all the time. Every year, NNPC gives out contracts to several marketers or refineries from all over the world, promising them crude, and they pay upfront for that crude. So where they are expected to get crude oil out of season beats me. But what I understand is happening is that they've gone outside of this to say, we have some crude oil, and we're giving this to Dangote, to Port Harcourt Refinery that I understand is coming on stream, they're testing right now, to Warri, to Walter Smith, and to the other refineries. So I don't think there's anybody out to sabotage Dangote Refinery. Let me tell you my personal take on this. Dangote has operated in a space for the longest time in the food sector where he's akin to being a monopoly. He's operated in the cement sector where he's probably a part of a duopoly. This is the first time Dangote is entering waters where you have mega players, probably bigger than his company is. And he cannot understand that Dangote, the superstar in food production or in cement production, is not a superstar in oil and gas, where you have the likes of Shell, Chevron, Mobil, and the rest. So I think that that's one of the issues that is at play here.
Okay, Dumebi, a lot of contradictions in your words. Number one, you were the one that said, this is the first time... I don't know
what the contradictions are.
Let me land, Dumebi. A lot of contradictions in your word. You were the one that said, this man owns the biggest refinery. And you are also saying in the same breath that this
Hang on a minute.
Let me finish, Dumebi. Would you let me finish, please? then in another breath, you said he's entering the waters for the first time, where they have a lot of big players. But in one breath, he owns the biggest refinery. Shell does not own a big refinery like Dangote. Others do not own big refineries. And a couple of points I want to put to you, because I'm reading the law, and I'm quoting for the law. The law here is saying in section 109, it's saying that the authority on quarterly basis shall transmit the national crude demand of all domestic refineries, which shall be the base for the determination of the crude oil supply curve. We don't see a lot of this transmission. I mean, I get your argument that we've done a lot of forward sales, which is a big problem now. But also, if you further read in this section of the law, where it says violations and penalties for non-compliance of section 109 of the Act, a lessee who fails to comply with the DCSO shall incur a penalty of 50% of the physical price per barrel not delivered and payable to the Commission. All right? So there are laid down rules as regards this domestic obligation. And this refinery, like other refineries, to have a right to ask for this domestic obligation. So the question is, how do we settle the impasse? Not the talk about somebody being a monopoly. We want the country to be able to move forward. And yes, this law, I admit to you, does not put up a cap of what should be set aside for domestic refinery. But there used to be a convention of over 400,000 barrels per day based on the threshold of the refineries we had working then, which, because the refinery stopped working, we have now pushed away. My question to you is, the authorities are not even being transparent with us as regards the trajectory of things and availability and even the amount that they've net off to now see what's even prevalent for local refiners in the first place. So that's the bone of contention here. Would you like to react to that, please?
May I respond?
Yes, please.
Well, I think you are misinformed, and I think you're also begging the question in what you said. When I said Dangote's refinery, when it comes fully on stream, is going to be the largest refinery in Nigeria, does not make it the largest refinery in the world, one. Number two, in this sector, any refinery worth its salt will have 4 years before takeoff, will have contracts in place, which is why you have marketers, refineries all over the world scrambling to sign contracts. Number three, you cannot give what you don't have. You made reference to forward selling of our oil, which the government has done for the last 8 years. I will see this government also doing the same thing. Now, if you've forward-sold your oil, you don't have any oil anymore to give. But in this case, the government is saying we have a small quantum of oil available to us after all we've promised to other people. It's this oil that's not available to us that we are sharing amongst Dangote and all the other refineries. The issue here is that if we take this conversation into the realm of emotions, people will be misinformed. I don't believe that it's in the government's interest in a country that is suffering the foreign exchange crisis to frustrate a Dangote refinery when it's in their interest to have domestic production, so we don't spend all the dollars we're spending every month to import oil. So I don't understand why anyone will think that. And again, when people have made allegations that people have conspired to frustrate Dangote refinery, let me ask a question. If all the refineries in the world, bar none, are all importing oil from different parts of the world, why would anyone want to frustrate a refinery in Nigeria who is going to be like the other players who can import oil from any part of the world? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I believe that the argument is emotive. We do understand that our government has failures, serious systemic failures, serious operational failures, but we don't have to bring that into every conversation, because in this conversation, that's not what the issue is, especially when the government has brought out figures to say, this is what we allocated to the different refineries. And if we do understand that the government has forward sold a lot of oil that they should have at this moment because their refineries were not working, that's the conversation.
Right.
So I don't want it to be
Dumebi, I have a follow-up.
Dumebi,
I have a follow-up. And the follow-up is,
sure,
how much is the exact volume? Because when you say forward sold, we didn't forward sell all of our oil, all of our production. I mean, when you forward sell, there's a threshold for forward selling. How much is the volume available now to be able to meet the quota, as we speak, of this direct obligation per daily production? That's the first question I'll ask you. Can you tell me the threshold, number one? Number two will be, what informs the allotment? Because in the law, and that's why they really read the section of the law to you, the government is supposed to tell us, and the regulator, when I say the government, is supposed to tell us how much is even available after all their forward sale, because they didn't forward sell all the oil, they just forward sell some threshold. So how much is that one that is remaining? And let me also ask you one question. In all of this, we're talking about Malta. Can you explain to me why all of a sudden Malta, that didn't have a lot of trade balance with Nigeria, according to the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, now has over 1 trillion in trade, which a lot of people are saying is pretty much oil imports coming in the space of 1 year. That's the Malta debacle. But the threshold is, how much is even remaining that the government has to share in the first place?
Brilliant questions, Rufai. Let me start. Let me correct an impression. There's no threshold in forward sales. It all depends on the requirements of the government of the day. If they need money, like they need money, they can promise any quantum of crude oil for the money that they want.
Dumebi, I'm likely to disagree with you afterwards. There's a threshold. The last loan we took, it was a 35,000 barrels per day threshold. So there are thresholds to forward sales. Forward sales cannot just be ad infinitum.
No, Rufai, let me correct you. There's a difference between what they promised, and a threshold means that there's an upper limit. That's what the word threshold means in this case.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that there's no upper limit. When the government has met their contractual obligations with those who have given money to them, whatever is left is what they are sharing to our local refineries, and which is the figure that they have published. This is what they are giving to these people. Now, essentially, what we are doing in all of this is asking the government, and which we should, asking the government exactly what quantum of oil do we have remaining after all you've promised to your various
But
lenders.
I thought you have an answer
That's
to
what
that.
the government should.
Do you have an answer to that?
I don't. Rufai, I'm not a spokesperson for government. I'm speaking from what is in the public domain, and that's what I'm providing to you. Okay, so the government should be able to tell us, hey guys, listen, we have only 200,000 barrels available, and this is how we share the 200,000 barrels. But these issues should not have. Why I said that, what I spoke about emotions earlier, is that these issues should not have come into the public space where regulator is fighting, seems to be fighting, an operator. Let me ask you a question, Rufai. I do maybe Kachikwu in the sectors in which I operate in. Do I have the muzzle to be able to take on a regulator and tell a regulator this or that and all that stuff? That's why I said that we have a superstar operator who has come into play right now. We must recognize it because it's important in what we're speaking about and in informing Nigerians appropriately. We have a superstar operator who is coming now and who is making demands. The issue is that all demands must be met by contractual obligation or by contracts. Does Dangote have any contracts for this oil in place? Absolutely not. I heard a statement, they issued a statement the other day, and they said that you have the likes of Shell and the rest who ought to give them this oil, but who ask them to go and meet their marketing departments. And in that case, that these guys put on, he has to spend about $4 million more per cargo. Let me say this quickly to you guys. There's no multinational in the world who will leave anything on the table for you. It's not Nigeria, it's not NNPC. It's not the way we operate here. Everything they can take, they will take.
All right, Mr. Kachikwu, thank you very much. Now, I just want to ask just some questions for clarity. Number one is, I would like you to speak on energy security, because I hear you saying that NNPCL has obligations, forward sales, and there's no upper limit in terms of threshold. But there's also something to be said for energy security, hence the domestic crude supply obligation, to ensure that at least at every point, Nigeria is secure with regards to its energy. How does that play out with what you've just described? That they don't have obligations to that level, they've given what they can give? I'd like you to describe that. Then on the other side of things is also about investment in this sector. If you say that there are systemic failures, but it doesn't apply in this regard, But someone's invested $20 billion in building a refinery that could potentially solve the energy, perhaps scarcity challenges to a very large extent that we have in Nigeria. And then a regulator comes out to discredit not just the quality of oil, but also, whether or not it has followed due process or it's well approved. Is there not something wrong about that, even in terms of optics for future or potential investors in that sector?
Good questions. When we speak about any security concerning this, the issue is very, very basic. When NNPC enters into contracts like the DSDP, or when NNPC has contracts to buy refined products from different companies across the world, they have energy security because they have different companies who are supposed to supply them with products, okay? Energy security is not going to be guaranteed by one refiner alone. Your energy security is if you spread it across to a lot of people. That way you have energy security. Let's understand that Dangote Refinery is a 650,000 barrels a day refinery. And if you look at the capacity for West Africa a day, 650,000. So obviously it's built a refinery to take care of the West African market. We have to accept the fact that a mistake was made ab initio in not planning for the crude oil for this refinery. And what I'm simply saying is that refiners all over the world can get crude oil from any part of the world. Does he save money if he's buying domestically? He saves the cost, quite a lot of cost in terms of freight. Yes, he saves that cost. But the issue is that there are no contracts in place. Government cannot force the likes of Chevron or all these people to say, sell to Dangote, because these people already have 2-3 year contracts in place already that they cannot break. That's the issue at play here. There are contracts in place that these people cannot break. So what do we do? How do we solve the problem of Dangote Refinery? Government must look at how do you increase production. That's what we should be speaking to right now. Nigerian government, NNPC, must be speaking to increase in production. If you have the opportunity of Dangote coming now, let's forget all the mistakes. Oh, this refinery is there now, and he says, I can deliver this amount. Government, what can you do to increase production? You're not meeting your OPEC quota. What do you need to do? All hands must be on deck. What do you need to do? This is what we should speak into. The second question you ask is about the issue of the regulator and the statements that were being made where it seemed they were discrediting Dangote. I will say this. Dangote went into the public domain, first of all. The regulator could not be seen as an irresponsible regulator or seen as sabotaging Dangote, and they responded. But I will say this very quickly. I don't agree that the regulator should have responded in that manner. There's no regulator in other parts of the world. You protect a system. You don't destroy a system, you protect the system. The conversations, the brick batting is not necessary. And it shows immaturity in how they handle that, where UPRC is saying this, and that's absolutely unnecessary. This is something that's ought to have resolved in-house. Take it out of the public domain, because it doesn't help us. You are right also when he speaks to people who want to make investments in Nigeria, and where we are giving the impression to people, rightly or wrongly, that we sabotage people. Yeah. I will also say this. There are business sectors who have invested tens of millions of dollars where I'm not getting government to support me. But the fact that government does not support me does not mean that government is sabotaging me. It means that I was foolhardy in venturing into a business where I did not put all my ducks in a row, where I did not get everything ready to operate. And all I have to do is to try and adjust as best as I can so that I can succeed in my chosen business. Dangote has said, oh, government, come and buy me out since I am being frustrated in this and all that. I don't think that's the way to go. I believe that a government who owns a stake in a refinery will not try and sabotage a refinery. I believe that government is constrained by their other contractual obligations. I keep on saying this. The issue is not about emotion. The issue is about the facts. And if we have the facts at play, these issues will be solved out of the public domain, and they will do everything they can to ensure that Dangote works. Dangote Refinery working is in the best interest of Nigerians.
And as you say
on
that point, if you allow me to interject, you say Dangote refinery working is in the best interest of Nigeria. Now let's take a look at the interests involved here. So of course we know that oil is sold by futures. However, let's also look at the nuance that we have playing out in Nigeria, where our oil is being mortgaged for the sake of loans. Just a couple of weeks ago, the NNPC was floating the idea, of wanting to take a $2 billion loan by using oil as collateral. Now, my question to you is, how many oil producing countries in the world are giving their oil out at such a discount? Because that's a discount, because when you're paying back the loan, there's interest involved, right? How many countries are doing that, and how many countries benefit from the fact that there's almost a discount that they can benefit from coming and picking up Nigerian oil for these loans that we continue to fail to service? And ultimately, how many people want the status quo to be maintained? And I take you into history. When you look at the 70s, when Libya decided to nationalize all of their oil wells, that was the beginning of crisis, a global crisis, because the world was benefiting from a discounted oil from Libya. So my question is, when we talk about David Hundeyin and bringing in the conversation of a geopolitical conspiracy, is it so easy to just discount it?
Again, based on what I've said to you, it's left for you to decide if you discount it or not. But I don't believe that it's in anybody's interest. They are global players. They are all competing. Like I said, Dangote, the refinery, fully on stream, it will be the 7th largest refinery in the world. I say to you again that 2 refineries in South Korea are amongst the top 7, not a drop of oil produced in South Korea. Go figure. Now, back to what you said concerning the loans. We don't know what other countries do. It's not in the public domain. I'm not going to come here and start lying to you. I know the facts and figures behind their loan agreements. But in Nigeria here, do we want to accept that our government has been irresponsible in taking loans to build bridges and roads that lead to nowhere? Absolutely. That's a different conversation. Our conversation today is about how do we solve the debacle between Dangote Refinery, the regulator, NNPC. I don't want a situation where we bring emotions into something that has to do with facts and contractual obligations. What we must do is increase our production so we can help this refinery come on board, come fully on stream. Dangote, I don't know if you are aware that Dangote started with the petrochemicals. Since he started, every single thing he required has been provided to him by government. He's exporting. The urea he's producing, not much of it is being seen in the local market right now. It's in Dorama, we see in the local market, but it's already exporting and all of those things. And the same government is supporting him in that. So how can we say government supporting you on one hand and the government is doing everything to destroy your refinery on the other hand? It makes absolutely no sense. How does he have the power to operate in that refinery if government is not giving him gas? So we have to understand what the issues are. Mistakes have been made in operational plans. Let's accept that. What do we do? Because it's our baby as a whole. What do we do to help him? It's his first time in this business. Let's understand all these issues. How can we help him, even if mistakes have been made? Increase your production so you have more allowance to say, Dangote, I can give you a bit more. That's what we must do. But we must remove all emotions out of this so that we are not, I know that it's very easy. One of the nicest things to do to go viral in Nigeria is to beat government down and what have you. But it solves no problems. We should be speaking about solutions right now. And the solution to this debacle is for government to do everything to increase their production and so that Dangote can get a bit more. I spoke about cement earlier on. We speak about inflation in Nigeria. Taking out subsidy in oil and gas is one of the causes of inflation in Nigeria. But I will tell you this, next to oil and gas is cement. Look at the cost of cement today, where it's almost a near monopoly. The Nigerian government some months ago, we all saw it, called him begging, reduce the price of cement. What happened? Today, cement is still sold at 7,200 naira in a place that's a precious resource that we have in Nigeria.
Okay.
I alone am giving Dangote almost 20 million naira in the area of cement. It's killing Nigeria.
Okay.
So let's remove emotions. We're talking about facts here.
Okay, so Dumebi, a couple of things. I'm fact-checking you live on the air. You said there are no thresholds to oil and gas contracts, forward sales. That's not true. That's factually incorrect. And I'll give you an instance. Nigeria pledged a total of 164.25 million barrels of crude oil at $90,000 barrels per day, starting from 2024, to repay the loan through Project Gazelle. So they are actually thresholds. And that's why I kept on asking the question. What are the thresholds? So we know all of these contracts, how much of oil they are going to take in 2-3 year timeline.
My dear Rufai,
let me finish
are
now.
wrong. The meaning of the word threshold.
Let me finish. Let me finish now.
My brother, okay, no problem.
You can call it threshold, you can call it cap. There's an end. It's not ad infinitum. That's what we said. So, but secondly, I asked you a very important question. I said the case of Malta. National Bureau of Statistics said between last year and this year, Malta, all of a sudden, trade with Nigeria increased tremendously. What is going on there? Because Dangote made mention of Malta. And around that time, National Bureau of Statistics backed it up with figures and empirical facts. So why is it that all of a sudden we are seeing a lot of activity out of Malta? Number one. Number two would also be, the question around transparency. This same NNPC we are talking about made announcements that there are 4 refineries will be working as of 2019. Today, we are not seeing any oil come out of the refinery. So the NNPC too cannot be absolved of all of this. I get all your gamut that is not in our best interest, but there is like a sabotage. And you see, so maybe your point and your assertion about it might not be the government sabotaging, but it's not only the government that directly sabotaging government affairs. Individuals and special interests also matter. So it might not be the government. In all fairness to President Dumebi, when all of this started, he said they should go and sell crude to them in Naira. But till today, we are hearing a lot of back and forth. So there might be individuals involved in the sabotage. I mean, those couple of points. Malta, most importantly.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I will start again with threshold. You said threshold can mean different things. In this case, a threshold for anyone is that, what it means is that, is there an upper limit where Nigeria cannot go and say beyond this limit, we cannot give out crude oil for money, right? And I'm saying to you, what any lender will look at is, what is your OPEC quota? What is your current production? Are you able to give me what you are pledging to me as and when due? That's what a lender will look at. Nigerian government will look at what they are currently doing, who they've pledged to, what allowance do they have? What if I've given out 1.4 out of 1.8, I have 400,000 left? Okay, if I have 400,000 left, okay, I might want to pledge 200,000. I have 200,000 remaining for my local refineries. So in this case, their threshold is what's remaining after all their obligations. But in the case when you speak about threshold, you spoke about the fact that there is a definite limit to what they can do. Absolutely not. Let's speak about Malta.
Maybe you turned it around, honestly. What I was talking about, maybe I know what I was talking about.
Okay.
What I was talking about was the threshold for forward sales. That was the argument. Threshold for forward sale. You said, is that infinite? I said, no. There's a threshold for forward sale. It will end one day. So if they are even giving 90,000 barrels per day, it will be to a certain millions of barrels. So that's what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about threshold. So the question of threshold, I asked you that what is even this limit that they have sold and they have remaining? And you say you don't know. You are not an NNPC spokesman. That's just it. So let's go to Malta.
Exactly. So which is what? Okay, so again, what I'm trying to say is that a threshold for them will be what they have remaining available. They cannot go beyond that. That is what their threshold will be in this case. Now, about Malta, what you will see is that there's always a pattern. Look at the last 2 decades, right? There's always a pattern when you look at the quantum of oil that goes to a particular direction. And it will always depend on the GMD of NNPC. It will always depend on the government of the day, and it always depends on where they are getting the best deals. And when they give to other people, a quantum will always go to a particular area where they are favoring them or what have you. Now, do I know what the details of Malta are? Absolutely not. I leave that to you guys who are a media organization who have resources and reach to go and investigate and let Nigerians know if there is anything untoward in that. I don't know what's happening with Malta. But what I can tell you is this, that I speak today as a Nigerian who understands that sector, who has multiple investments in different sectors, where I am suffering because the Nigerian government has failed. But I can tell you that common sense bears no support for the assertions that are being made that Dangote Refinery is being sabotaged. It's just an issue of lack of operational planning and what government can do to support him, because he's a baby in this field. Is say, okay, listen, this is what we can do to make adjustments to support him. But I will not accept, because it's there for all of us to see. There's no reason why anybody should sabotage.
All right, Mr. Dumebi, very quickly on this thing around, because I think it's a big statement where you say it's lack of operational planning, big statement. But is it lack of operational planning that caused the NNPCL to withdraw its initial commitment to owning 20% stake in Dangote refineries and the impact on its on revenue for Dangote refinery? In 30 seconds.
Brilliant question. NNPC took a stake in Dangote Refinery, but the smart thing that ought to have happened alongside that is also a side agreement that says we have a stake in you are part of us, and this is our commitment. Let's sign an oil purchase agreement. That was never done.
So it wasn't Dangote's lack of Dangote Refinery's lack of operational planning at that time.
No, it was Dangote's lack of operational planning, because as a refiner, the first thing I have to cater for is my feedstock.
Thank you.
Every day, I'm a builder.
Okay. I'd like to thank you so much, because we are pressed in time. We've got ads coming up next. It's always a good spot having you. Thank you so much for your time.